Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 55 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Too much. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend, for sure, for sure. This episode, we are going to go over our third base rankings for fantasy redraft. As usual, we'll sprinkle in a little minor leagues and sprinkle in a little dynasty as well. Um, since we've been doing a number of podcasts per week, do you have any? I expect you may not have coffee stories. You got any coffee stories? Any updates?
I have one.
Mhm.
Uh, had an opportunity here at a local coffee shop. They invited me to participate in a cupping this week, and one of the farms that they buy from was a farm that Starbucks also buys from, which
Oh,
those in Check the Pod might know that I've worked for Starbucks for a very long time. But Starbucks and this other company, Passenger, were one of this farmer's four clients, and Passenger and Starbucks have been his most loyal clients, and he has two dogs, and he named one of them Starbuck and one of them Passenger.
oh, cool.
So he has two German Shepherds on his farm,
Yeah.
and they're named after his two most important clients. And I love German Shepherds, and coffee is obviously a big part of my life. And it was just the you run sometimes that stuff happens in coffee, especially there's like a connective tissue. It was kind of a I was gifted a bag of coffee from his farm many years ago. I still have the bag, so it was this interesting quizzical moment of connective
Cool.
of connection.
Was there what was the difference? Is there or what is the difference between the what Starbucks is able to extract from that coffee versus what Passenger is able to extract from that coffee? Are they different? Are they the same? Are there similarities between the two?
Yeah, what I cooked yesterday was a very well balanced coffee. It's from El Salvador. It's
Mm-hmm.
where his farm is. The coffee that I mentioned was a Pacamara varietal and hybrid. And it's been so long I don't remember exactly what the notes were.
Mm-hmm.
But this coffee was just really sweet, really well balanced. Nothing exotic in terms of fruit tones or citrus or anything like that. Just a really nice, sweet cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't have a sensory experience to tie it back to. It was more a connection to the person and the place.
Yeah.
That was neat. Uh, and I think there's something about coffee that I really love. And it's one of the things about this smaller company. They invited me in and to cup with their team, and I felt really privileged. And they know every single farmer, like
Mm-hmm.
every cup on the table.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to say like, "Oh, this is this person's coffee, and
That's
this is what
cool.
they do." And these three are from this cooperative, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a connection and an ongoing relationship to uh, each individual supplier. And there was one lot where they did an anaerobic fermentation, and they asked them to do different time ranges
Mm-hmm.
of the fermentation, and they paid for all the coffee up front. So like, hey,
Oh wow.
no matter what the result, we'll
Yeah,
buy it all.
that's
So
cool.
it allows them to do some different things,
Experiment.
and just the commitment to the supplier is something that's really important to them. So yeah,
Awesome.
just more of the human connection. But it was really, really good cup
Love
of
it.
coffee and just sweet, very sweet.
Cool. I thought I would share this today. This is, I don't know if you can, how well you can see it. This was a
Um,
bag of Carmen Geisha from Panama that was gifted to me when I opened my coffee shop in Chicago. So I had a uh, previous relationship with Kuma Coffee from Ballard in Seattle. He was my roaster for about 90% of the time I had my shop in Seattle. Mark Barani was his name. He's since sold Kuma, but Kuma was great, and we were his first. Became as we built our business, became his first big account, and then Kuma became pretty big in Seattle after that. But when I moved to Chicago and built my shop in Chicago, Mark sent me this, and I think it was a half pound or a quarter pound of Carmen Geisha, but it was something that was probably the most special coffee I think I've ever consumed. I think it's, you know, I think it was some sort of astronomical price, per ounce. But I framed it. And as you said, coffee has, I think for both of us, has a million memories. And most of those memories are about personal connection. And Mark was a big part of um, he was a big part of the launching of both of my shops. And I always loved his coffee and promoted his coffee, and was really appreciative of the work that he did. But this is a reminder for me of being in the coffee business and some of the great friends that I've made. So I'm sure Mark Barani will never listen to the pod, but if he ever did, and thanks, Mark, because you gave me a lot of joy, and a lot of other people quite a bit of joy as well. But yeah, it's something I just keep in my office as a reminder of really wonderful times. Again,
That's
coffee
sweet. I love it.
for us. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Let's do it. First, third base. As we typically ask, how many players do you have in tier one at third base?
One of one for me.
Ooh, okay. I will preface mine with, yeah. So I'm ranking Bobby Witt Jr. as a shortstop. I think that's where he ends up over time. Obviously, if he has shortstop and third base eligibility this year, you can use him at both, and we're talking mostly redraft. I do incorporate some dynasty thoughts into my rankings at times. I'm going to rank him at shortstop. I see him as a shortstop. I think that's his long-term home. However, as you might be anticipating, Aaron, if Bobby Witt Jr. if I was ranking him as a third baseman, I would actually be ranking him at number one. There were some pretty stark similarities in his profile to Jose Ramirez. I liked his age better, and I think he has more room for improvement. But as it stands, I'm ranking him as a shortstop. Therefore, I have 4 players in my first tier. Who is your one of one?
Yeah, it's Jose Ramirez.
Mm-hmm. Is
So he was head and shoulders above this group based on the projections I have right now, and a $56 player, and the next tier was at 45. So he
mm-hmm.
was out in front. Well, not in front.
What is it for you that differentiates him from the others?
Well, I have Machado, Riley, and Devers with more home runs than him projected. But he also has 23 steals, an OBP of projected for 349. All of the plate skills and plate appearances. He played hurt the last half of the year, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at his position, I have question marks about most of the guys behind him, whether it be youth or can they do it again or swing and miss. And I don't really have any questions about him. So
Cool.
he's someone that I'll be hyping. And when we do our KDS of trying to convince you he should be our first pick in TGFBI, or at least throw his name in the hat, because I think he'd be a great building block for a team.
Sure. Um, he is my number one as well. I think it's a lot. My opinion is that it is a lot closer. That group is bunched a lot closer. My reasoning is, so the 126 RBIs I think was a bit of an anomaly. I do think 100 runs and 100 RBIs is something that we can continue to expect from him, and obviously double digit steals. In the last 4 full seasons, 20 steals were his fewest. He did have 10 in 2020, but that was the COVID year. That number I expect to, with the new rule changes, the pickoff rule, the bigger bases, I do think that he might be able to maintain the 20 stolen bases, but I don't see that number going up. And that is the major advantage that he has over the other players in this tier. He has the least.
Is that an age thing of why you don't think he'll steal more?
Yeah, it's an age thing. It's also when I look at his build, his body. He's a very stocky guy as it is, and I think that typically those guys don't get smaller if that's his natural build. And so as you get bigger, you typically get slower. There is also some average risk with him and some hit risk with him. The last 5 seasons were 270, 255, 292, 266, and 280. And that has coincided almost directly with his batting average of balls in play, which we know has some volatility to it. So again, and then he also hits 50.6% fly balls. That's what he did last year, at least. And as we know, fly ball hitters can often run lower averages. So I see some decrease in his speed, which would decrease his stolen bases. I see the potential for, a 240 season, a 250 season, which wouldn't tank him, but I think would take away some value. And then I also see him as having the lowest game and raw power out of the four in this tier, meaning his OPS maybe was the lowest of the four last year, but could go even lower. That said, you can't debate 29 steals and 20 stolen base, or 29 home runs and 20 steals and 126 RBIs. In 21, he had 36 home runs, 111 runs, 103 RBIs, and 10 steals. So he clearly is, out of this group, to me, he clearly is number one. I just think it's a lot closer. Part of the reason why I think it's closer is that I think Rafael Devers is a lot better of a player than he was last year. And I have Devers at 2. So if we're jumping to your next tier, who do you have at 2?
Machado.
Okay. So for me, it was Devers, Machado, and then Riley, and rounded out the top 4. Devers, for me, in 19 and in 21, 156 games each, he had 32 and 38 home runs, 129 runs in 19 and 101 runs in 21, and then 115 and 113 RBIs. Last year, he experienced, I guess, a lack of luck in some ways, quite a bit of 14.2% swing and miss, barely above an 80% zone contact. There are some things to be concerned about, but they're things that he's done over his entire career. He also hits the ball incredibly hard, 93.1 mile an hour average exit velocity. So last year, he went down to 27 home runs. He was in the mid 80s in runs and RBIs. The team also wasn't very good. And I don't know if that impacted his ability, his focus or his ability or not, but I actually expect him to get back closer to what he was in 19 and in 21, in part because he's only 25 years old. But Devers is my number 2. I don't have any qualms with putting Machado at 3. I understand why. I think Devers has a higher upside. I think Machado was much more of a safe bet, but a very good one. And if we had the pick between Devers and Machado as co-managing a team, which I think we actually did have that pick last year, I would not have a single qualm with picking Machado over Devers. They're very, very close for me. How about you?
Yeah, so I have the same 3 players, just in different order. I have Machado and then Riley and then Devers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, my concerns about Devers are the same. He's in the top 4, say concerns. The things that are red flags to me and give me pause are the same things that, he had in his profile last year. As you said, he's kind of the same player. He did go through a pretty extensive lull in the second half and had some down weeks and months there. But he certainly turned it on at the end of the season. Took me out the last 2 weeks. So faced him in the playoffs the last 2 weeks. Yeah, he's a power player, one of the slowest players in the majors. But so he doesn't give you anything on the base paths. But great power.
Mm-hmm.
Middle of the order. And I don't think Boston's going to be any better than they were last year.
No, I will say in 18, he had 5 steals. In 19, he had 8. 21, he had 5. And last year, he had 3. And so, at least for Roto, maybe not for head to head, but at least in Roto, for me, that matters. Do you share the same opinion that maybe a 0 is that maybe 5 steals from a position like this doesn't necessarily put you over the top, but it certainly is something it could be a tiebreaker if you're comparing him to a similar player.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, I have him down for 4 steals. You're right. Mm-hmm. He does steal a handful. Just more looking at the pure speed, and that might contribute some of it to his BABIP volatility and some of the things like that.
Right. 13th percentile sprint speed.
Yeah, but despite, the chase and despite the swing and miss, he's in the bottom 30% in zone contact, as you said. He's in the
Mhm.
bottom 40% of whiff rate. Despite all those concerns, I mean, he's consistently hit for a good batting average,
Right.
and so being a left-handed hitter and shift limitations, he might get a little bit of a rise like a lot of left-handed hitters as well. So,
Mhm.
I have him for a 273 average, which is the highest batting average of my top four,
Uh-huh.
and that might be low, you know,
Let me ask
just
this.
space.
And I don't really know what the answer is. So I have on my spreadsheet, I've got pull, center, and oppo percentages for balls hit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the new shift rules, I wonder if some of those balls that we've seen like smoked directly up the middle
Mm-hmm.
and are caught very often, which is like the most disconcerting thing for me because like we grew up in a time where if you smoke the ball up the middle, it's a base hit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that central or center percentage is going to matter. It's going to be impacted, or the number of hits that people get from hitting the ball up the middle is going to be impacted by the new shift rule as well. I don't know if teams are going to, for a player like Devers who hits the ball up the middle a ton, it was actually his highest or highest area balls hit. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if teams will put the shortstop and second baseman really close to each other,
Mm-hmm.
or if players that hit the ball up the middle like he does will actually benefit from the new rules. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody speak about central hit it or central batted balls as much as left-handed pull side. Uh, but it's something to pay attention to. And Devers, like I said, that's where he hits the ball the most is straight up the middle.
Hmm.
But it's just something to think about. Do you think that number means anything when it comes to the new rules?
I do, because they are still allowed to play the short. They still can play the shortstop pretty close up the middle, but he can't be to the left of second base.
Mm-hmm.
So, teams that are still positioning their defenders would likely position the shortstop more up the middle,
Right.
against a player like him. And I think where the real chess match comes into where then are you going to position the second baseman?
Right. Are you going to
Are you
position
going
him
to,
straight up the middle against someone like
yeah.
him? Or are you going to create a huge hole between the second
Hmm.
baseman and shortstop and play him to really pull? It's
Yeah.
I'm so interested to see how this impacts baseball. I'm super excited about it.
I just hope that well struck hard hit balls will be rewarded more often. I think that would be
Totally.
the outcome that
That's a good
I'd like to
start,
see.
right?
Yeah.
I agree. All right, so Machado, I guess we should spend a little bit of time on him. I feel like it's like literally we could probably just plant our third base rankings conversation last year and plug in the 3 minutes on Machado when it would be basically what we will say this time. But what is it about Machado that makes him your number two?
He's the most balanced player of the top four in terms of his categorical balance.
Mhm.
So there's just a safety there, and there's nothing under the hood skills wise that is a glaring area of opportunity for him. He does well across the board. He stands out in hard hit rate, and he's 27th percentile or 75th percentile in barrel rate, so he's not high end, but he's still very, very good.
Mhm.
His launch angle, 16 degrees. His ground ball rate, 37.6. Yeah, he's still fast enough. He strikes less than 20% of the time. He's going to be their number three hitter.
Mhm. And a
So
very good
he's
offense.
just very, very good offense. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I had a hard time deciding between him and Riley, putting him at two and three. I mean, obviously, you can say a lot of the same things about Riley, except that he's not as balanced. He doesn't bring as the speed, but Riley's also 25 and Machado's 30. So I heard that. I heard your voice in my head saying like, "Hey, the younger guy." Because everything you say about Machado's quality of contact, you can say that about Machado or about Riley, and even add some, but he brings a little bit more strikeout. It's a little bit more swing and miss to the table, but a little bit more top end power. But he's a number three hitter as well and a very good offense. So
Mhm.
those two outside of the speed are just so close. I
I
don't
think
think you can.
that's the big difference for me between Riley and Machado outside of the steal. Well, you're trading steals for homers in some ways, and I think you're trading a little bit of runs and RBIs will probably be on Machado's side. But the big difference for me is the 3.5% K or 3.5% in K rate and the swinging strike difference. And if Riley is able to close that gap with Machado, then he does overtake Machado because of the power. Um, Machado's crazy, man. Like, so I've got his Fangraphs page pulled up right now. This is from 2015 when he was 22 years old. This is the number of games that he's played. 162, 157, 156, 162, 156, COVID, 153, 150. He's a warrior, right? And he's never had below in those seasons, he never had below 28 home runs. He never had fewer than 5 steals, but he went all the way up to 20 steals one year. Like he really is a metronome, right? You really can count on him to produce that. And until a player like him, who's not even 30 yet, if he continues, or he's just 30, maybe, just turned 30, well, 6 months ago, but a player like Machado, you probably get at least, speaking dynasty now, at least 2 or 3 more years of very similar production before it falls off. You're talking about a Hall of Fame career, right? And I love him. I think he's great. I don't, because Riley doesn't quite have the track record that Machado does. I think that's why I would keep Machado at 3 and Riley at 4. Historically, I'd probably go after the younger player with more power. But because of Machado's track record, I think it's really difficult to put someone with maybe 2 years of history above him. He's way too consistent. I also think having Soto potentially in front of him for an entire season could really drive give him better pitches to hit, and B, drive his RBIs closer to a 110 or a 120 even. All right, so that's the end of that tier for you and the end of that tier for me. Anything else to add in this top tier?
Actually, I do have one more player in this tier,
Oh, you do?
and
Okay.
it is Bobby Witt.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I have him in the second tier with this group at number 5.
Mm-hmm. All right. So should we save the Witt conversation for next time, or should we talk about it now?
That's fine. I'll be making him a shortstop as well since he's
Okay.
eligible there, so we can
Sweet.
talk about him then. That's fine.
Sweet. All right, first question. If you are picking between 10 and 15 in a redraft, are you picking Bobby Witt Jr.?
No,
He's not a first round pick for you then.
no.
Is that because of the risk profile, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay. All right, so I would I love him. I think that when I look at Bobby Witt Jr., what I see is a player who's just scratched the surface of his ability. And in a season where he just scratched the surface and he really scuffled out of the gate, he still put up 20 home runs, 30 steals, and 80 plus runs and RBIs. I do think he's going to be the type of player in the beginning where some of his advanced metrics aren't going to be pretty, right? I think there are a lot of things about Bobby Witt that justifiably we can really pick apart. His 4.7% walk rate is quite frankly, it's ugly, right? He hits the ball in the air a little too much for me, for a player who's as fast as he is. I'd like to see him hit more line drives. The 46.4% fly ball rate last year. Launch angle was a little bit high. Swinging strike rate was 11.6%, which I expected it to be a little bit higher. Zone contact was 85%. That's what you look for. But again, he's 22 years old last year. He's going to be 23 this year. And a player with his pedigree who, like I said, I'm going to pull up his splits, but really did scuffle out of the gate. He gave us the statistics that we look for in fantasy. He gave to us, right? Which are runs, RBIs, steals, and home runs. And for me, it's really hard to look past. That's what I want. And at shortstop, man, he's already putting up a lot of numbers that compare to Trey Turner, right? And Trey Turner was the number one player picked last year in most leagues. Real quickly, so in March and April, he hit 216, 247, 558. He did scuffle in August and September a bit as well, but for May, June, and July, his OPS was 829, 803, and 761. But again, those counting numbers, the runs, the RBIs, the hits, or the homers and the steals, which is what we play with in fantasy, those numbers are already there for me. I see him blossoming into he could be 30, 40, he could be 35, 35 next year. And that would be, obviously that's the high end of his potential, but it would not surprise me. Is there anything you want to add about some of the things that I guess give you pause with Bobby Witt Jr. before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
If he goes 30, 40, I'll eat my hat.
I'm holding you to that, bro. I don't think he's going 30, 40. I think he might go 30, 30 though. I think that might actually happen, which would be pretty phenomenal. All right. Should we move on to the next tier?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sweet. So we're talking about your number 6, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have the tier of 2 here, and then it's off into oblivion after that. So I have 2 veterans in this tier for me at 6 and 7, Bregman and Arenado. Bregman, I would prefer strongly of the 2. Mm-hmm. His play profile and his takes and place in the lineup. I just not that no one is in a good place in the lineup as well, but Bregman's 28. No, Arenado's 31. Arenado's going to I'm going to say consume. That's not the right word. He's going to accumulate a lot of counting stats. He's going to play every day. And batting average leagues is, he's going to be more of a hindrance. He's going to pull his value down, but he's going to accumulate a lot of stats. I have him for 24 home runs. So yeah, it keeps him up here in this above $20 value, but I prefer Bregman, who I have for 23 home runs. And neither of these guys run at all. But Bregman, with his walk rate in the lineup context, I really like him of the 2 here.
Mm-hmm. I see them as very, very similar. They're both players who try to get way out in front of the ball and pull it down the line. They have that same skill, right? And so neither of their numbers, their batted ball numbers, jump out at you at all, right? Neither of them hit the ball all that hard. They're both under 89 miles an hour average exit velocity. Bregman was even under, he's a 109.2 for his max exit. As you said, Bregman, the way in which he takes walks is something that I really do love. It's 13.3% walk rate last year. Arenado, 8.4% walk rate, so does not walk at the same rate. I do think Arenado's hit tool is slightly better than Bregman, maybe a half grade higher. I think their lineup context, I think, is pretty similar, to be honest. Arenado's hitting around Goldschmidt and now Contreras and Edman, as we talked about last episode. I think Newbar is kind of on his way to becoming a very good regular. Jordan Walker, if he comes up and produces as we think he might, would add a ton to that lineup. And then if Nolan Gorman and Dylan Carlson ever reach their potential, now you're talking about a really deep lineup. So lineup context, I do trust Houston's offense. I agree with you that I think Bregman is in a really great situation, but I think Arenado is pretty close. I give Arenado the nod, mostly because I think he provided a little more speed last year, 5 steals versus 1. 2, he provided 7 more home runs. But I think his track record is more proven. And whereas Bregman is, he was coming off the big injury 2 years ago, and there was questions as to whether he was going to be great. And I think he was very, very good. but I don't know if he has another level to him or not, right? So, but to
Right.
me, again, this is very similar to the top tier, where I think that those two are almost interchangeable. If it was up to us and we were picking and we had our choice between Arenado and Bregman, I'd say flip a coin, and I would be very happy with both of them. And they're both solid championship third basemen for sure.
Hmm.
Who
Surprised that you,
put it Arenado over Bregman?
yeah,
How come?
because Eric Bregman's OBP is 360.
Yeah, but Arenado's is 258 or
You
358.
mean,
What's that?
I got him for 314 for this year. So
Right.
maybe he just
So
spiked it really.
I'm looking at last year's stats.
Yeah.
Um, his OBP, the OBP drop was a product of his average drop in 20 and in 19. But the previous 3 years, between 17 and 19, he ran in the 370s. And so I feel like the 358 is probably in the right area. He had a 290 BABIP last year, which is, I think, is right around the average.
Hmm.
And which is surprising to me because of the number of fly balls that he hits. But I'm going to assume he's going to be right. Maybe 270 BABIP, which would take his batting average to about a 270, which would take his OBP down to about a 340.
Hmm.
I usually do lean. Uh, Obviously, we've had this conversation a million times. Lean towards the player with the higher OBP. Um, but I think the home runs and the steals advantage for me makes me lean Arenado. I just thought of this, and you can take it for what it's worth, but I do wonder if Bregman being an Astro, um, at all, like very deeply subconsciously impacted my rankings. I hate to say that because it would tank the objectivity of all of the things that I say, but the reality is, Bregman is a player who I've both seen a ton of as a Mariners fan, and so I have very kind of close knowledge of him. But I want to dislike him, right? Because he's on the rival
Right.
team.
Sure.
But just being very open and transparent, I think that is something that I need to continue to keep in mind. I don't think it entered my thought process in ranking Arenado and Bregman, but I think it is worth acknowledging that I have to continue to think as objectively as possible when it comes to players on teams that I don't like.
No, I think acknowledging it is a good, like that raises it in your consciousness and can minimize its effect. So it's good.
Mm-hmm. Last player, you have one more player in this tier, correct?
No, it's just Bregman Arenado and then a
Okay.
cliff.
So I have one more player in this tier. It's my number 7 third baseman, and it's Gunnar Henderson. He's
Okay.
the obviously the top prospect for the Baltimore Orioles, 21 years old, came up last year. 132 plate appearances last year. He hit 4 home runs, had a steal. Um, Good player, good player. I think he gets 600 plate appearances if he's healthy this year. I do think his ultimate home is going to be third base. Um, he's a little too big, I think, to be a shortstop. Uh, just a kind of a player 60s across the board for me. I'm 60 hit, 60 power, 60 speed. Uh, One of those may get up to a 65 in his peak, but I see a player who is going to be 2020 or 25-20 for years to come. And I think next year, this time, we're talking about Gunnar Henderson, just below Austin Riley in that top tier. Um, I don't see a lot of holes in his game. I don't love him as a prospect. He's not a player. I do roster him in one league, but um, the and then the other thing that gave me pause about him as a prospect last year was his it was kind of a really big 1 year jump, right? His 2022 was almost out of nowhere. But as I watched more film of him, a lot of the research that I did for the Monos pod, looking at minor league players, his swing, his game, his build, the way he carries himself, all the different things that you look for, I see a superstar. I really do. And I think the floor for him is as a few-time All-Star third baseman, and I think the ceiling is as an elite superstar in the major leagues. So he's my number 7. I'd be really happy to get him there. You got anything to add on Gunner?
I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you'll shoot them all down. Uh, he's only posted a sub 20% K rate once in
Mm-hmm.
his career.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and
That was a big
he,
swing adjustment was what
yeah,
happened last year for him.
and then 27% last year in a very small sample. So
Mm-hmm.
I have questions about swing and miss. His splits last year were really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was confused. Okay, so Gunnar Henderson for me, I have him at number 11.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you did a good job outlining his ceiling and his pedigree. The the things that I would see would give me pause, and the reason why I don't have him higher is that he never posted a strikeout rate below 20%, except for one season coming up, and then he followed it up with a 27% strikeout rate last year, paired with a 2-degree launch angle. His splits against left-handed pitching give me pause,
Mm-hmm.
especially since they have so many infielders. And then his grades on his speed don't really match the high performance and Statcast that I saw on him based on his performance in 2022. So, like with Julio Rodriguez, you can work on your speed.
Sure.
You did. He is a bigger guy,
Mm-hmm.
but the raw speed seems to be there. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, that adds to his ceiling. But if he's a bigger guy, he might lose some of that. I don't know. But for 2023, yeah, the splits, the strikeout rate give me a little bit of a pause, but I
Mm-hmm.
have him at number 11 still.
Sure. I think the splits part is I think is legitimate, right? If he has a problem facing left-handers, that's going to be an issue. Um, and there's kind of no way around that. The fact that he has a plus hit tool and he has power. I think the plus hit tool isn't really debatable. He's got 60 to 65 in game and raw power, and he's fast, right? Like he can steal bags. And so when you couple, for me, if you have a plus hit tool and you can take a walk, that puts him above the next guys on my list, regardless of whether I've seen it from him or not. I've got Drury, Suarez, Chapman, Hayes, Bohm, McMahon, Moncada, Young, Vargas, Miranda, Paredes. Like I go down that list and I think to myself, if I'm picking for my team, do I want any of those players over Gunnar? Right? They're safer. I think that the floor for a lot of those guys is going to be a lot safer because we have a longer history. But Gunnar is a much more talented player than anybody on that list, with the exception of maybe MIguel Vargas. And I would take him over Vargas too. The talent is there, the hit tool is there, the power is there, the speed is there. We can pick at some of the things, and I think those things that we pick at are legit. But I'm still willing to take that chance. And then the players above him, Bregman and Arenado, I can't make the argument for Gunnar over them yet. But he's just too talented, and he has too much runway and opportunity in front of him with Baltimore this season to pass on him at that point in time for me. So he's the bottom of my second tier. All right.
Got it.
The next, 9 players? This should be fun. How many more tiers do you have?
This is it, man.
This is it for me too. I've got them all globbed into one.
Yep.
And
Yep. That's exactly.
it's not out of laziness either, for me at least.
Nope. No, I feel the same.
I
There's no
think
really lines of demarcation.
if I put all 9 of them on a dartboard and I threw a dart and I decided that was going to be the third baseman that I picked, I don't think I would be overjoyed with any of them, and I don't think that I would be necessarily angry that it landed on any of them. Let's see if we have the same. Who do you have at 8? Or I guess 9 for you, or 9 for you, right?
No, you're right. You're right the first time. 8.
Okay.
Matt Chapman.
Okay. I've got Chapman at 10. Admittedly, I think having Chapman at 10 was a little low, but that's where I put him. Quickly, what is it about Chapman that has him there for you?
Elite chase rate. Um, elite hard hit
Mhm.
rates. Um, he is going to swing and miss without a doubt. He's in the 20 percentile in zone contact. However, they're changing the dimensions of that park to be more balanced, more hitter friendly, and so he's a supreme defender, as we know. So I just think the volume, the environment, the team context, and I can swallow the swing and miss when it comes with the lack of chase and walk rate.
Mhm.
It makes it easier for me. It's more palatable for me.
Mhm.
Um, when it's the profile is stabilized a little bit by that aspect, or it's more swing and miss than the guys above him, and that's why he's down here. But I love that. I like the power, and I like the playing time, and I love the plate skills.
Mhm. I the skills themselves I'm not in love with. But what I will say in Chapman's and you're right, the park is changing, which is in his favor. The thing with Chapman that helps him along for me is just that he had before 2021, he had 3 seasons of 800 plus OPS, and including an 864 in 2018 in a huge home park in Oakland. And so I don't think those skills completely evaporate, right? They don't just go away. There's some until he physically starts to deteriorate. So he's 29, and I think that those skills um, are still in him, right? Age 30 season is not it would not be unexpected to see him get back over 800 OPS, which puts him probably at about 30 home runs and maybe a 240, 250 average, which vaults him potentially, if with the right numbers, vaults him maybe to the bottom of the tier above, right? Um,
Right.
so I think there's more to him. I don't know that I would want to go into my fantasy season with Chapman as my starting third baseman, banking on him being great again. Because I don't know, I'd put the odds on that on like, you know, 3 out of 10, maybe 30% able to get back to where he was before. But the skills are very clearly there. He's also an example for me of a player who, I see the hard hit rate at 50.7. I see the fly ball and the pull rates as in the high 40s. He's obviously trying to hit the ball out to left field. I do like the 11% walk rate. But I watch him and I see a player who's kind of lost at times, right? I think he's been lost at the plate for a couple of years now. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, what keeps me from ranking him at the top of this tier, despite the fact that he has that history. I still think he's searching for what he had in Oakland. Um, like I said before, it's not out of the realm of possibilities at all. I just don't know if he'll find it. He's my number 10. I
Yeah.
I have two above him. Uh,
Yeah, and that hip surgery he had was no joke. It's pretty severe. It was severe.
mm-hmm,
So, it's fair to, yeah, wonder if he's still in an adjustment phase, adjusting to that,
mm-hmm,
or if it took him back a step and maybe he'll never quite reach that again.
right. Uh, and then I should also mention that in 18 and 19, um, his zone contact was 85.2 and 82.9. And so it has gone down quite a bit in the 70s the last 3 years. One promising, so to me, that's one of his biggest downfalls is the lack of ability to make contact in the zone. But that said, over the last 3 years, 2 years, he's actually increased that number. So he's almost above 80% again. So there is some progress with that zone contact number, and his swinging strike rate has gone all the way down from at its highest in 20, it was 15.2%, all the way down to 10.8% last year. So there's some signs of progress. Not a bad bet to take for sure. Um, and a player that I think, like I said, does have a little bit of upside still left if he can find it. Who's at 9 for you?
A player you probably don't have ranked because his health is Max Muncy. I know
Mm-hmm.
that you're concerned about his health. I have seen nothing negative in terms of that this offseason, so I continue to rank him based on what he's did last year and uh, done in his career. So I have him at number 9. A lot of the same skills I spoke about with Chapman in terms of on base power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so his walk rate's even a little bit better, and he swings and misses a little bit less. But overall, they both have ISOs north of 215, ton of power in the bat, and very sound approaches, but some strikeouts as well.
A couple questions with Muncy. Yes, I am concerned about his health. My bigger concern, are you not concerned that he hit 193 last year?
Well, his splits in the first half, as you mentioned. I can't remember who we were looking at splits with. Maybe it was Skender. I can pull it up. I know his first half was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it got, he was more himself in the second half. He's
Yeah,
never going to be a good batting average, but he is left-handed and does hit the ball really hard. So he might be someone that benefits and gets back into 240, 250 range. But to me, he's a power RBI
right.
on base player.
So, yeah, he had 164 in the first half and 230 in the second half. So my bigger concern with him is, yes, the average hurts. I think from thinking about roster construction, I think there's probably room on most teams for one guy like that, right? If you're looking for kind of big power RBIs, OBP, low average type of player. I had a couple of them on my team last year, and I think it hurt quite a bit at times. Even though I love Buxton and Schwarber, it hurt me to have both of them on the same team. It's something to pay attention to with regards to building your roster out with a player like Muncy. That said, my bigger concern, to be honest with you, is playing time. I think that Muncy gets at most next year 400 and maybe 450 plate appearances. I say that because currently Roster Resource does have him hitting cleanup and hitting and at third base for the Dodgers, but it's time for MIguel Vargas to play, right? It's time for them to know what they have in MIguel Vargas. And I think Vargas may end up with more plate appearances than Muncy next year, especially if the Dodgers are not at the top of the NL West right out of the gate, and they decide, okay, we understand we might be a wild card team this year, and we really want to develop some of the young talent that they've been holding back. So you've got you've got Vargas, right, who can play second and third. It might play a corner outfield spot, but is very, very much kind of the heir apparent, I think, at third base coming up. And for me, a top 25 prospect. You also have in the minor leagues, you have Michael Busch, who's now 25 years old, right? Who has 30 home run potential at second base if he can stick at second. They also have Yorbit Vivas, who is a high on base, really, really decent hitter in Double A, and he's 22 years old, and he's a good prospect. So I'm talking about two second base prospects, one who's a premium prospect, and a third base prospect who's capable of playing second, who is universally probably a top 30 prospect, right? And these guys are not young anymore, right? Busch is 25, Vargas is 23. I see a very realistic place where Muncy is essentially a part-time DH, and he's moving around at second and third. To me, that's more realistic than him getting 550 plate appearances next year. And based on the Dodgers' movements in the offseason, I think they may see it the same way. They didn't spend a ton of money. I know people are talking about them saving up for Ohtani, but you look at their current offense, they've got Trace Thompson, they've got Chris Taylor, James Outman, JD Martinez. This is not the Dodgers of last year. So my argument against Muncy, and nothing against Muncy as a player other than that low average, but my argument against Muncy being ranked is just that I think he's going to get phased out. And I think that's the right thing for the Dodgers to do. And I don't think holding Rojas or Busch back is going to happen. Anything else? Anything on those prospects that I mentioned?
No.
Okay. Who's next for you?
MIguel Vargas.
Number 10?
Yep.
I've got him all the way down at 16. I like it. Let's go.
I'm in love with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been studying him a lot, and so I'm in the tank for him right now. Last year at AAA, and looking at just his underlying skills, because in the PCL, the counting stats you have to take with a grain of salt. But in his contact rate, he was in the 86th percentile. Swinging strike rate was below 8%.
Mm-hmm.
His hard hit rate, or his hard hit percentile was 84%.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in the 84 percentile on hard hit. So, um, and he had 16 steals last year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at his projection, he's been, has a, I'm not saying he is, it's not a player comp. It's a Manny Machado-like profile,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's very balanced. And when I see that hard hit rate and those sub 8% swinging strike rates, my eyes just light up. So, and last year in a very limited sample, his sprint speed was in the 93rd and a half percentile, according to StatCast. So that speed, when you see him, he doesn't necessarily look like a burner. He does have a little bit of speed to back up that minor league production. So yeah, the only question for me is playing time. But I personally, I know we're forecasting. You just did it with Muncy. I think he plays second, third, and left. I think he sees north of 500 plate appearances this year, and I'm over the moon for him personally.
Uh, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't know that. I'm not a believer that he's going to reach um quite the same peak or upside as others might. I do think he settles in as a somewhere between 20 and 25 home runs and kind of a 280, 290 hitter. Is he, Arenado without the defense, or, you know, not, I don't know if, I think he's going to be a notch below Machado to me. That's where he peaks. Um, I'm rooting
Yeah,
for
I
him. I
think
love him as a player. I'm rooting for him a ton.
yeah,
Um,
I think 280 and 20 and 25 is a great, like, very realistic to me based on the skills.
right.
The Dodgers are second in all the Major League Baseball behind the Reds in right-handed home run park factor.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be, uh, you don't have to be Pete Alonso or
Right.
Julio or somebody like that to get
Right.
out of that park as a right-handed hitter. I mean, how many home runs has Justin Turner hit the last 5 years that look like fly balls?
Right. Most of them.
You know, so my point being that with that quality of contact and being a right-handed hitter at a park that's conducive to right-handed power, I think that helps his profile. If he was hitting in Minnesota or someplace or Seattle, I would be much more bearish on his power.
Right.
But I think in that park with those skills, and again, I think by the end of the year he's going to be triple eligible. I could be wrong, but again, we're in the forecasting section of the show apparently.
Right.
But we just uh, we just wrote off Max Muncy, and I'm giving Miguel Vargas every day at bat. So hey, it's our
Is
world, right? So
right. I I don't know what the Dodgers will do. Nobody does. If it was me, honestly, if it was me, I'm putting Vargas at third. I'm putting Bush at second. I'm putting Lux at short, and I'm letting all three of them play. 100, it provided health, 145 games. What do we have in these guys? What can they do? Settle into your position, learn your position, become a master at your position, right? Because neither Vargas nor Bush are anything above average defenders at their position.
right,
And Vargas is a little better athlete, even though the thing about Vargas too that has been criticized and I think is slightly legitimate is part of why I don't have him in like the Gunnar Henderson range, because I think there are some, we're talking both players probably are like I said, a 60 hit, and both players may grade out as a 60 power. Vargas has the sprint speed but hasn't demonstrated the steals. I think Gunnar is going to steal more bags, but Gunner's a more quick twitch athlete. Vargas is not a quick twitch athlete. And I think that is a lot of times for me, that is what takes you from a 20 home run hitter to a 30 home run hitter, is
mm,
that quick twitch. And I don't see it in him. So for me, again, I'm putting him in at third. I'm saying this is your position. You're the new Dodgers third baseman. We want you to play here for the next 10 years. Your partner on the left side is going to be Gavin Lux. We want you guys to develop some chemistry together, learn from each other, learn together. Michael Bush, same thing at second. Outman's going to be in left. He's going to be behind you guys for 450 plate appearances, the next couple of years, and we're rolling with it, right? And we're saving money, and we're trying to get Shohei Ohtani. This whole moving around second, third, left field, how do you focus? if
Yeah.
with that kind of, having to focus on your defense in that way. That's just me. And I also think it would benefit Vargas's offense if he had a permanent position. But all those scenarios say both Chris Taylor and Max Muncy are there as insurance. They'll
Hmm.
play, but they won't play as regulars. We'll see.
Sure.
I've got Vargas at 16. The reason I have him, I actually have Josh Young just above him at 15, the third base prospect for Texas. That is only because I think Young, Young is going to open up as the third baseman in Texas, right? The starting third
Right.
baseman, whereas we don't know if Vargas is going to. My inclination is he gets 450, 500 plate appearances, but he could get 350, which would essentially make him not eligible for the top 16 at third base with that few plate appearances. So we'll see. Again, prognosticating, which we both love to do. Who's your number 11?
So Gunnar was my 11. Yeah, Vargas and Gunnar there. I prefer Vargas for this year, but long term,
Mm-hmm.
respect everything you're saying about him as a more high end athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, so I have Anthony Rendon at 12, and the reason being is, I've been projected as a 6-star player, which is well below a lot of the other values I have on the board below him.
Mm-hmm.
However, I look at the names I have below him outside of Josh Young, they're just kind of guys to me. And I would rather, as I did these ranks, I would rather take a shot on Rendon
Mm-hmm.
catching lightning in a bottle and being Rendon healthy enough to be himself.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's not again, or if he gets hurt again, I just go the waiver wire because these are just guys. And I would rather, again, wager that Rendon is Rendon because he can be a difference maker. And I'm not sure the guys below him, with the exception of Young, who obviously I should have rated above him. The way I'm talking, I need to make that adjustment right now. Because I had Young in my top 16 as well for a lot of the reasons that you said.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, after that, it's just a bunch of guys who I don't think are going to be that much of an impact. And I think Rendon, if he's right, is an impact player still. He's 32, um, but he's just struggled with health so much since going to LA. But I have him at 12.
You're showing your former Nats fandom right now, which I love, right? Because you were a Nats fan when Rendon peaked,
Right?
essentially, right? I
Absolutely.
love that. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. And you watched him a ton, as did
I
Matt.
did.
So 2019 Anthony Rendon, which is 3 years ago, right? 4 years ago, if you want to call it that. 646 plate appearances, triple slash of 319, 412, and an OPS of 1,010, 12.4% walk rate, 13.3% K rate, 34 home runs, 117 runs, and 126 RBIs. Okay. So my question, I don't have Rendon in my top 16. I think that his injuries have zapped his superpowers. I don't want to say that because I really like Rendon a lot. I love him. I loved him as a player in Washington, and I was not a Nationals fan, but I loved Rendon always. Um, Mariners should have taken him instead of Dustin Ackley. I think it was the same draft. Uh, but I have him outside of my top 16. I guess the question is now, all the things I said about Chapman, right? Chapman has this history a few years ago of having a plus 800 plus OPS. He's kind of middling right now or trying to find it again. I get that he's doing a lot better than Rendon and trying to get back to that space, but Rendon has produced a different level of upside. What is keeping me from putting Rendon in the same category as Chapman, right? If they're both trying
Right,
to get back to where they were, and part of Chapman's ranking is that he has achieved it in the past.
right. And he played in 47 games last year, and part of the reason why I had the nerve to put him there was in that small sample, he still was in the 97th percentile in chase rate. He was still in the 85th percentile on whiff rate. He was
Mm-hmm.
still in the 89th percentile in weak contact. He was still in the 28th, 25th, or 73rd percentile in zone contact. So, all those underlying plate skills and contact skills were still showed in his
Mm-hmm.
age 31 season. And his projectional variance is exceptionally low, which speaks to his balance as a player.
Mm-hmm.
When he's right, when he's playing, he's someone who contributes across the board.
Right.
So
I,
yeah,
I love
I don't, but
I love
it
the
comes with
thought
a
process of at this point in time, you can throw a lot of these guys in a hat and pick one, and it is what it is. If you're going to do that, you might as well take the dude with the upside, right? It's why we like
right,
Vargas here. It's like why we like Young here. It's why we
right.
like Rendon here. Is Beatty another one? It's you might as well gamble at this point, because if you miss, you can still find one of these guys somewhere in all likelihood,
Yeah,
or you can
exactly.
deal for one of them, for virtually nothing, right? For a prospect or a draft pick. All right, who's next?
So I live as we were doing this, I moved Young above Rendon because he
Right.
should be. So now I have Vargas, Henderson, Young, and then Anthony. So then my last three are Baum, Miranda, and Suarez.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Baum and Miranda are similar to me. They're both first base, third base eligible. Baum's 26, Miranda's 24. I think they're both going to hit for a good average, sub 20s home runs. Both hit from 5, 6, 7 in the lineup. Maybe Miranda hits higher. We'll
Mm-hmm.
see. I kind of doubt it. But I think both of them are decent hitters, decent hard hit rates. Will hit for a good average, but not really give you anything power or speed wise. I could see them both if their teams do really well, spiking like 85 RBIs in a good year, but I don't
Sure.
think you can project them for that.
Sure.
But they hit behind good hitters. They're not going to be at the top of the lineup. So kind of decent younger guys, maybe who spike a 25 home run season, but I don't think either one of them really have that consistently in their profile based on what they've shown so far. But good hitters, right? Good balanced hitters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have Suarez in at 16. Um, he could legitimately hit 200, but he could also still hit 30 home runs if he hit 200.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he, I should have it in front of me. You have last year's stats, I'm sure.
I
I
do.
have him down for 29 home runs and 80 RBIs. So again, we're in the last part of this range here. So despite the batting average concern, I think getting 30 home runs and 80 RBIs is would be something at this point, despite the drag on the average.
Right.
And I want to mention Ryan McMahon because doing a deeper dive on him, getting prepared for this podcast, I wanted to pull back a little bit in my endorsement of him at second base. I did not realize his splits were as bad as they were. He had a 71 WRC plus versus left-handed pitching last year,
Yep.
and he had an 85 WRC plus away from home. So I had him, I think, as my 15th or 16th second baseman. I have him outside my top 16 at third. And I just wanted to mention that because I kind of endorsed him as a last in second base option. And my analysis was a little bit lacking in that. So I
But
wanted to mention
start
that.
them against right-handed pitchers in Colorado, and that's it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it just, yeah, it doesn't give you a lot of confidence in very many,
Yeah.
situations. So,
Yeah. So yeah, Suarez was 31 home runs, 87 RBIs last year, 236, 332, 791. He did walk at 11.6% rate. His zone contact was sub 80%, and his where am I here? He struck out a lot. So Suarez was weird for me because I look at his numbers and I think, okay, 76 runs, 31 home runs, 87 RBIs at a bottom tier third baseman. Cool. Sign me up, right? If I can't get those guys up top, sign me up. Watching him was painful as a Mariners fan. I felt like he was striking out all the damn time. He hit some clutch home runs, specifically the one against the Braves to tie it up. I was there for that game. It was awesome in September. But I have him at 9. Um, I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable with it, but that's where I think it justifiably I can put him. I think the Mariners offense is going to be even better this year. I have Brandon Drury at 8. I know he was not uh he's not viewed as a great player. Last year he did have 87 runs, 28 homers, and 87 RBIs with the 813 OPS. And I didn't see anything in his profile that struck me as unsustainable. I know that's not what we've come to expect from Drury, but I like that, right? If I can get that for my third baseman, I'm in business. And he didn't sign a free agent contract with the Angels to not play. So
right.
I think that the playing time is there. He's demonstrated the ability to get close to 90 runs and RBIs. And 90 runs and 90 RBIs is Bregman territory, right? So he
Right.
was my top of this tier at number 8, Suarez at 9, Chapman, as we talked about, at 10. Bohm was 12. I did have McMahon at 13, despite the deficiencies. I think the guys below him are the guys below him. I've got Young at 15 and Vargas at 16, as I've spoken about. The two that I want to talk about that are in my top 16 are, I've got Ke'Bryan Hayes at 11. I know he's a player that you rostered for a while, that we've been round and round about. I've tried to deal for him from you, I don't know, quite a few times now. I like him. I try to not get too caught up in, if the player just does this one thing, they're going to be great. And with Ke'Bryan, we all know if he's able to elevate the ball, he could be in that top tier if he's able to elevate the ball. He's got that kind of skill. But last year he had, in 560 plate appearances, he had 55 runs, 7 homers, 41 RBIs, and 20 steals, and a sub 700 OPS. That's scary, right? And it's scary to rank a player like that in the top 16. But I also see that he's 25, and I am starting to try to target players who are just coming into their peak, and everything else is there, as you've spoken about before. The zone contact rate is above 92%. The swinging strike rate is 8.2%. The average exit velocity is 91 miles an hour, right? He's just hitting the ball into the ground, 49.4% ground ball rate. But a player who, even if he continues to hit the ball into the ground, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he hits 300, right? So if he's a 300 hitter with 12 home runs and 20 steals at third base in an offense that's getting better, you're still looking at something very, very good. I ranked him here mostly because if you've got power and OPS at a lot of other positions and you're lacking stolen bases, Hayes is a very safe target at third base who you could, I think, get inexpensively, who can provide you with steals. So to me, again, this is picking from the menu. He's the one player in this tier, along with maybe Vargas, who can provide you with some steals, which can be a boost. But a player that I would take a flyer on. I think everything is there for him to take the next step if he is just able to elevate a little bit more. Again, we can say that about 1,000 players, right? We could say if Austin Meadows didn't hit the ball straight up in the air all the time, Austin Meadows could hit 30 home runs again, right? But he hits the ball straight up in the air. I get that it's not a simple tweak. But maybe I'm next to take the ride on the Ke'Bryan Hayes carousel or roller coaster, I guess, is a more appropriate one. I'm not going to push you to have to comment on Hayes unless you want to.
Unless there's a category for hope.
Right.
No, it's I have conditional formatting on my sheet, and if you're in the top 10%, it's green, and if you're in the top 20%, it's blue.
Mm-hmm.
And plate skills, 3 of his 4 are in green or blue.
Right.
And it's
and
yet
yet
I watch him. I watch almost every one of his at bats, and I don't think he knows what he wants to do yet. I don't think he knows what kind of hitter he wants to be. He looks like he's hearing voices up there, and that's just my read from the outside. I think he's swinging too much, and I'm also worried about his health. He had the wrist thing 2 years ago, and then last year it was his back.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch him at the plate sometimes. I'm like, I can believe that he maybe doesn't feel that great.
Right.
But if you're 24 and 25 and you're having wrist issues and back issues, but he's such a badass in the field. He is smooth. There is power in the swing. He's also been someone, as he came up in the minors, was kind of slow to progress. So I still think there's some potential development there. Saris, who's one of my favorite analysts, always talks about like launch angle and max EV, like those tend to peak around 26 to 27.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, that's when the guys plateau, and then eventually age starts to win out. So with him only being 25, I still think it's not completely irrational why I joked about hope being a category, that there is still maybe development in the bat, given his arc through the minors.
Right.
His pedigree. His dad was a ball player as well.
Right.
Um, and Paul Sport, another one of my favorite analysts, is talking about. They were talking about Hayes, and he said, we all want, and I really appreciate that Paul said this because I felt like he was talking to me. Um, he wasn't, but he is just insightful. He said, we all want to see numbers to verify what we believe. We all want to see proof of belief, proof
Mm-hmm.
of hope. But sometimes, and I think you're better at this than I am, able to set that aside and just say, what is the true talent?
Mm-hmm.
But that was Paul's point is maybe, maybe there's development that isn't this way on the page. There isn't always going to be a number to indicate growth, right?
Sure.
So anyway,
I
that's
think
my
so. If I can speak on that just for a second, this off season, just kind of the what I've done so far in evaluating, which has been mostly numerically based with major league talent and mostly video based with minor league talent. The conclusion that I've come to is I wouldn't say it the way that Paul did, but it's a similar theme, which is we look for numbers to verify the things that we expect or see, right?
right,
And but if we are looking for numbers come about for many different reasons. There's so many factors that impact why those numbers are there, right? And if we get cut off here, I'll come back on the other side and talk about a little more. But when we're talking, especially when you're talking about fantasy baseball, you're trying to get out in front. You're trying to find the player. You don't want to pay full freight for a talent. You're trying to find the talent before they produce. And if you think about like if a player's body is already developed, right, and they're producing in the minor leagues, they're great. Like this is awesome. They're 23. MIguel Vargas is putting up these crazy numbers. He's safe because you've already seen it, right? Your thoughts have been confirmed in numbers. But if your body isn't developed yet, right? If you're still kind of scrawny, but you know that the talent is there, you may not put those numbers up until you get up to the major leagues or until, for a third of a season in double A before you're called up. The other thing is where you're raised, the nutrition, the infrastructure, the amount of swings you get to take in a cage, the quality of your mitt, the quality of your spikes, right? Like the quality of the water where you live, all of these things contribute and to your development. And so there are players who are coming from poverty who are talented who may not show the numbers because they're too busy trying to adjust culturally to living in the States or to having a new diet or to being across in a different country as their mom. And, I just think that that's something to, I guess the point I'm trying to make is players develop at different speeds for different reasons and produce numbers earlier, later for different reasons. And if we don't take into account why those things are there, right? Why Brian Hayes didn't put up great power numbers in large part because he's super skinny, which runs counter to what his father was because his father was a pretty stocky dude, right? But I think those things matter. And if the power's not there yet, but you expect the body to develop, then you got to be patient with them. So those factors are all go into scouting for me. Again, watching video, I realize that you see these players like a Jace or a Josh Young coming out of Texas. They played baseball in Texas their whole life, and they're coming from, families where their families can take them to batting cages all the time, and they're groomed to be these players, and they're eating great beef. And, I'm spouting and stereotyping, but you get my point, right?
I
Versus
do. Yes.
versus coming from San Pedro de Macorís and playing with the freaking yarn ball. So
Yeah.
I just think we have to take that into consideration when looking at a player's progress. But eventually it normalizes. At this, Brian Hayes his father was a major leaguer. I'm not saying Hayes is that guy, but just that developmental paths take different turns and take different amounts of time. And if we're not thinking about that when we're ranking players, specifically young players, I think we're missing the boat. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Well said.
You said that. The other player I want to talk about in my top 16 before we get to the dregs and the minor leaguers is my beloved Yoan Moncada. Did I rank him in my top 16? I absolutely freaking did at number 14. I don't know why. I still believe that he is a skilled hitter. I think he still has an above average hit tool. I think he still has above average power. If I was grading him in the cages, I see 60 hit, 60 power with the ability to take a walk. He's only 27 years old. I think his stats last year are a bit empty because he was hurt and kind of in and out of the lineup. But taking his durability into account, I think has to be a thing at this point in time because he's been hurt so often. But a player that's 27 years old who was once the top minor league prospect is worth paying attention to for me, regardless of whether I think he's going to reach that potential or not. He ran a 787 OPS in 21, which puts him in this range of player, maybe even slightly above this range of player. And in 19, he ran a 915 OPS at third base, and he had 25 home runs and 10 steals. So, and he's been injured. So let's say he's been injured the last 3 years and he does get back to health this year. There is quite a bit of upside with him. And again, when I look at the players below him, Miranda, Paredes, Beatty, Muncy, Yandy, Turner, would I rather have those guys or Moncada? Personally, it's Moncada. I'm not going to fight someone who says it's somebody else because that's their preference. I still believe in his talent, and it would not surprise me if he ends up back on my home league team this year because I can't give him up.
Sure.
I just love him. He takes a walk. He's got power. He once had speed. He's a good hitter. He's a cool dude. He's still my guy. Probably be saying the same shit next year too. Right? Is there anyone on that list of dregs worth mentioning for you? I guess we should talk a little bit about Yandy Diaz, because he did run an 824 OPS at third base. Why is he not on our list of top 16?
Yeah, as we were talking pre-recording, I kept trying to find ways to push him down, push players past him, and just 140 ISO. I'm for 12 home runs, 3 steals, kind of an empty leadoff hitter with no speed. I mean, the Rays, I don't know what you're gonna do. Yeah, he just is not very appealing to me. Um, yeah, even in with hits as a category in OPS, I don't see a lot to get excited about.
He's the third base version of Jeff McNeil and Luis Ariz.
Luis Ariz, yeah.
A player whose profile I think neither of us really appreciate or want starting on our team. Is he decent to pick up? If you need to plug a hole at third base, you can plug him in and expect some average and some OPS because he does get on base as much as he does, but he's not a starter for me at all. The other player on this list that I think is worth mentioning is Isaac Paredes. He's a player that we both have talked about a bit on previous pods last year. He had 205, but he had 20 home runs in 381 plate appearances for the Tampa Bay Rays. 68 hits, 48 runs, 45 RBIs. There's clearly a shit ton of power in his bat. His walk rate was 11.5%, and his K rate was 17.6%, which are both very, very good numbers. Zone contact was over 90% last year. And his pull rate was almost 52%, which is pretty crazy. And fly ball rate was 45.5%. So let me ask you this. I give you all those stats. His BABIP was 195 last year. Okay, so he's pulling the ball in the air. He makes a ton of contact. He walks. He doesn't strike out that much. He had a BABIP below 200. What's not to like there? Why are we not ranking him in our top 16?
Well, I think first of all, he has short side platoon risk, so I think you have to start with the playing time.
Sure.
As a reason why I wouldn't be in a hurry to push him up. He came up with the Tigers as someone that I saw as a line drive not that he didn't have power, but sort of a line drive, gap to gap, high contact, high line
Mhm.
drive type hitter.
Mhm.
But watching him take at bats last year, there was definitely an approach shift. So I don't know if that's Tampa Bay saying like, "Hey, this is what we see in you. You know, we want you to really get out in front and try to pull the ball." If you look at his spray chart, as you said, it's exclusively to left field. Um,
Mhm.
his launch angle was what we would consider optimal. It's 15.8.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just you know, really slow player. The bat is gonna carry him. No, he doesn't really have a defensive home. So that's my concern. I like some of the skills, but the fact that he's right-handed, and while I value the power for fantasy, the lack of balance in the profile makes me want to push away. As well as the uncertainty with the playing time, and I have him on my roster. I wouldn't mind reacquiring him just as Brandon Lau, insurance potentially, but do I want two Rays? I don't know. I mean, we don't. Our bench is not long, um, but he's an interesting player. He does a lot of things really well,
Mhm. I
but I
wonder if
haven't done.
he's see, it's funny because I thought of him as Curtis Mead insurance. Because I think Mead will probably end up at second. But not next year, but kind of down the line. I
Yeah,
think you're right. Ultimately Paredes is probably a 350, 400 plate appearance guy. Maybe he's like the Rays right-handed version of Max Muncy in some ways, right? Because he is second and third and DH and maybe a little bit of corner outfield. Um, would I love him as a Mariner? For sure. I think as a real life player, I'd like him a lot more than I would as a starting third baseman on my fantasy team. But playing him in matchups when you know he's starting, he's not a bad player to have on your bench because I do think he's going to produce. And there is a slight outside shot that he hits well enough in the beginning of this year. The talent is there for him to hit well enough this year, at the beginning of this year, where he forces himself into the everyday lineup. Um, that would not, it's not outside of the realm of possibility for him, right? Uh,
yeah.
because of
I
some
just would
skills
like
that
to
we
see
talked
him go
about.
back to a more balanced approach.
I like the approach. I think he's got 30 home runs in that bat. And I don't think you don't have to squint too hard to see it, right? 195 BABIP, man. That's bad. And he still hit 20 home runs. All right. Enough on Isaac Paredes. You want to add anything to Justin Turner going to Boston? You think he's just kind of vanilla milk toast? Uh,
I think he is. I mean, I talked a little bit about Dodger Stadium and right-handed power.
mhm,
So, but honestly, the Fenway is pretty conducive to right-handed hitters as well.
mhm,
So he would be my, you mentioned like if you need some at bats on a weekend, I think Justin Turner would be of that vein to me.
mhm,
He's exceptionally slow at this point in his career, but I think in that park, it's conducive to batting average. And, he might, hit 275 this year, but he's 38. So, um, yeah, he's a good plug and play, decent player. Um, that I would put in that Yandy Diaz category.
mhm. If I had Justin Turner on at the end of my bench, and I think he's going to acquire first base eligibility with the Red Sox pretty quickly as well. If he has first and third base eligibility and a little bit of power, I don't think he's a bad player to have on your bench, especially if you can kind of mix and match matchups. If you don't get one of those top players at first or third, having him to mix and match isn't a bad place to be, right? You get like a
Right.
Vogelbach, DH type, and you have Turner as your other alternative. It's not the greatest situation in the world, but playing matchups with those two might actually give you a decent production overall at first base once he gets that eligibility. I don't have anyone else on my dregs list. Uh, I do have a couple of minor leaguers that I'd like to talk about where they would go on a
Okay.
dynasty list.
Okay.
Um, the first thing I would do is I'd probably keep the top three the same. I'd keep Ramirez, Devers, Machado in a dynasty league, kind of in that order. Um, I don't have a real argument for moving Riley down. I just don't know that I'm 100% on board with him yet. I would move Gunnar above him in Dynasty. If I had what I'm saying is if I had the choice between the two in a startup, I'm taking Gunnar over Riley. I just did, in fact. And then the other couple that I would like to mention for Dynasty is that I would have, I know you're going to be shocked by this, I would have Noelvi Marte at 4 for my Dynasty third baseman overall. Anyone who's ever listened to this pod does not need me to go into Noelvi Marte yet again, but I love him. And I think that he is going to he's going to be the regular third baseman in Cincinnati. They keep those fences there, and he's a regular first baseman in Cincinnati. I'm telling every last one of you guys, go acquire Noelvi Marte. I'm just telling you. So he's my number 4. I'd have Henderson at 5, Riley at 6. And then the Arenado, Bregman, kind of those guys are kind of a mismatch. But in that mix, I'd also add Marco Luciano, currently a shortstop prospect for the Giants. I think he moves to 3rd. Talked a bit about him on the other pod. Power over hit, but tremendous power, really beautiful swing, 21 years old. I think he's a 260 to 280 hitter with 35 home runs in his bat at his peak. And then the one last one to include is Colson Montgomery, currently a shortstop prospect for the Chicago White Sox. He's 20 years old, made it to Double-A last year. Sweet left-handed swing, basketball pedigree from Indiana. 6'4". A lot of comps were to Corey Seager. I don't know that he has the power that Seager does. I do like Montgomery's hit tool. Doesn't have a lot of speed to speak of, even though he was a basketball player. I think he would be a decent starting third baseman on your fantasy team, but I don't think he's going to lead you to a championship. He's going to be more kind of top of that 3rd tier if I was ranking him now. But Marte, Luciano, and Montgomery are the 3 young guys outside of the ones we already mentioned that I would have in my top 16, with Marte and Gunnar being the 2 that I would truly try to target. Any comments on those guys? Any favorites in that group? You can include Beatty and Young and Vargas in that group as well.
Yeah. So you don't rank Cruz at 3rd. You keep him at short.
O'Neill?
Ellie.
Oh, Ellie De La Cruz. No, I think Ellie, I don't know, man. I don't know where to put him. The reason why I don't have him at short is because I believe their thought process is Edwin Arroyo is going to be the shortstop, Noelvi Marte is going to be the third baseman, and Ellie De La Cruz is going to be either the center fielder or the right fielder.
Okay.
That's what I see. If I was the Reds, that's what I would do. I'd put him in a position where it's a lot easier to learn and play and tell him focus on hitting, right? Your value is going to be as a hitter, focus on hitting. We got short taken care of. We got third taken care of. And I think but I don't think it's that he can't handle short or third. I think if they didn't have Arroyo and Marte, I would probably have ranked him at third base. And then offensively, if say he does play third, okay, just for argument's sake, I would put him, and this is just hedging the floor with him. I'm putting him probably just below Marte and above Gunnar. But I don't think that that's where he would land. I think he'd either land at number 1 or he would land at 16, right? That's just
right.
that's the volatility of the type of player that he is.
Sure.
I still love him. He's still in my top 10. I think it's easy for people to jump on, the criticism obviously is the swing and miss and the fear of the swing and miss and the zone contact. But as you stated, some of the greatest players in baseball have sub 80% zone contact rates. He just got to hit the ball once, right? Out of all those pitches, you got to hit it once. And
right.
with kind of explosiveness, I'm not giving up on him. And I think he's getting a bad rap from a lot of prognosticators right now. And I hope he proves everybody wrong, right? He's another one, he certainly has a decent probability of failing, but shoot, I'd trade quite a bit for him if I could. I think Ellie is the real deal, especially imagine him in that park. where the ball
No,
flies. Like,
yeah, no kidding.
he's phenomenal. But that's where I
Yeah,
would put him. My love for Marte is well stated. I
yeah,
think Marte is pretty safe, to be honest with you, as a bat. And that's why I would have him above. But Marte certainly doesn't have the ceiling that De La Cruz does, for sure. What about you? Any comments on those guys, including Ellie?
no, I don't. I don't. I was surprised that you didn't bring Jordan Walker in your group. You just keep him in the outfield for now.
He's a right fielder. He's
Okay.
a right fielder, and if he doesn't work in right field, he's a first baseman. Um,
Yeah.
but I think he is very much not a third baseman. I haven't thought of him as a third baseman for almost a year now. Um,
Cool.
Mostly because I just don't think they're going to play him there.
Right.
He's also 6'5". It's hard for a 6'5", unless you're Scott Rowland. It's hard to be 6'5" and play third base. Um, then the only other prospect I have on this list is Brady House, but I don't think he's even worth mentioning right now. He's got to put together a couple of good years and go find himself a new back before he actually is considered again. We did
Cool.
it.
All right, we did it.
Anything else with third base you want to bring up?
No, I don't think so. Um,
It's
yeah,
not the
there's
most
just
fun position when you get past 6 or 7.
no, it's hard work.
I don't know what to do about third base for me. I'm a little nervous about third base going into next year, but we'll see what happens. Um I don't have any of the my top 7 in our home league. So I'm definitely scrambling. It's gonna be piecemeal.
Yeah, we'll see. All
All
right,
right,
Tino,
bro.
enjoy your weekend.
Good to talk to you, man.
Bye.
All right.